Right. Well, Paul did work with women. If you read the book of Acts, women are mentioned. They're mentioned in some of the epistles, and he apparently worked quite closely with them. I think Paul's gotten a bad rap. The URANTIA book said he wasn't all that great with women, but, at the time, sexual sensuousness was a real evil, and I think Paul tried to keep himself away from that, and that there was a lot of that in the teaching. Interestingly enough, the pastoral epistles of Paul's, which is where almost all of the bad-mouthing of women is done, are now considered by scholars not to have been written by Paul, but rather by one of his followers a generation or so later.
Really?
Yes. Be that as it may, one of the things I'm doing with the film is I've done a lot of work to dig out some of the women who have been involved in this process. There's some great feminist scholars out there working in the history, digging out old manuscripts where women were really playing a major role in what was going on. There's a lot about Mary Magdalene that's out there in some of these other documents as being a significant leader of women in the Jerusalem area. There's some great stories about Phillips Daughters who were involved in evangelism, went up to Ephesus and were involved in a movement that was parallel to Paul's. So, these are being brought out. I'm trying to find those so that I can get a good balance between men and women being involved in the early propagation of the gospel. And the other one is the racial stuff. You look at the classic art about this period, and they all look like white folks, European white folks, and they weren't. They were Middle Eastern, they were African. Athanasius, who's highly regarded in the URANTIA book for what he did in the early church councils, he was called the Black Dwarf. He was an African. And, we've lost a sense of the racial and the racial diversity, the diversity between men and women who were involved here in these early years. So I'm trying to capture some of that in the film, too.
Oh, wow. Good. So I imagine then that you're kind of going through a lot of artwork then in order to find certain symbology or representation of these people?
Well, the part of what's interesting is that if you read the old manuscripts, you'll read about the Black Dwarf, and then you go online and try to find a picture of him, and he looks like a white Greek. So, I've hired a portrait artist, a very good portrait artist, who's doing portraits of these key people, animated portraits that I'll be using in the film, because I'm going to be doing a lot of biographical sketches of people who've been key players in bringing the gospel out into the world.